Joining us now, HUD Secretary Ben Carson. Mr. Carson, I want to start with that terrible incident in Atlanta. I assume you've seen the video. Rayshard Brooks was clearly resisting arrest, then ran away from officers with one of their stun guns. But was it appropriate to use deadly force against someone whose original offense was that he fell asleep in the drive-through lane at a Wendy's?
Well, you know, Chris, my previous career as a surgeon at Johns Hopkins, whenever we would have an untoward event, we would establish an internal review board of people who actually knew what should be done and review every aspect of it, and then disseminate the findings of that to everyone to make sure that it didn't occur again. And I think this is a situation that is not clear-cut, you know, like the callous murder that occurred in Minnesota. And it really requires some heads of people who actually know what should be done under these circumstances to make judgments.
Why do you say, sir, it's not clear-cut?
Because in the case in Minnesota, there was an officer who was clearly in the process.
No, I understand that one, but why was the Atlanta case not clear-cut?
Because we don't know what was in the mind of the officer when somebody turns around and points a weapon at him. Is he absolutely sure that that's a non-lethal weapon? You know, this is not a clear-cut circumstance. Now, could it have been handled better? And certainly in retrospect, there probably are other ways to do things. But again, we don't know. We, the public, don't know. Is there a reason that they don't use, you know, nightsticks or those expandable clubs to subdue somebody who's resisting? We don't know the answer to that. There are qualified officers who would know the answer to that.
I want to ask you about the bigger issue, which is whether or not there is a racial problem with policing in black neighborhoods. And I want to put up some numbers, sir. Over the last 5 years in Minneapolis, police used force against blacks at a rate at least 7 times that against whites. And nationwide, blacks, who are less than 13% of the population, are shot and killed by police at more than twice the rate that whites are. I'm going to put this on a personal level, Secretary Carson. You have 3 sons. Honestly, have you or your wife, Candy, have you ever had what's called the talk with any of your sons about how to act, how to conduct yourselves when you're confronted by a policeman?
Well, you know, I had the same talk with them that my mother had with me and my brother. Told them that we should always respect the positions of authority like the police. I told my sons the same thing. And I've never had a problem. They've never had a problem. Does that mean that there are no racist cops? No, it does not mean that. Does it mean that we need to get them out of our system? It absolutely does. And we need to look at appropriate reforms. And this is probably a good time to shine a spotlight on it and get it done. And I think that's one of the things that the president has made very clear, and that is, you know, this is an issue. It will be looked at. It will be dealt with very much the same way that the other problems were. Justice, criminal justice reform, people have talked about it forever. This administration has gotten it done. Getting money into the areas that have been depressed. This president has done it. Dealing with HBCUs, he has done it. And he's going to do something about this as well.
Well, let me ask you specifically about that. And let me just say quickly, and I suspect you won't be surprised by this, as a white person, my parents never had that discussion about the police with me, and I never felt the need to have it with any of my children, which I think points out part of the problem. But I want to talk about some of the measures that House Democrats are proposing in their legislation about policing. And let me put it up on the screen. A ban on chokeholds and no-knock warrants, a national police misconduct registry, limiting the legal immunity police have so it's more possible to sue them for misconduct. Mr. Secretary, do you expect the president to support those 3 ideas?
I expect the president and the administration to engage appropriate stakeholders and to look at everything. And obviously, we do not want to create a situation where the police are under the microscope and that they don't want to do their job because they're afraid. That is not going to be useful. So obviously, we have to look at the big picture and make sure that we're doing, when people make decisions based on anger or emotion, seldom are they good decisions.
I want to ask you also about what seems to be a pretty significant cultural shift that's going on in this country. NASCAR, with its deep roots in the South, has now banned Confederate flags from all of its races. The Republican-led Senate Armed Services Committee voted to rename military bases named after Confederate generals, but President Trump tweeted this week: "Our history as the greatest nation in the world will not be tampered with. Respect our military." Question: does the president risk being left behind at this moment of change in this country?
Well, Chris, you're a person who knows a lot about history, and you probably know that many of the bases were named after Confederate generals as a conciliatory movement after the war. And to now change that would be having exactly the opposite effect. We have to recognize that we have a history. And to try to hide that history is probably not a smart move. You take the greatest book ever written, the most popular book, the Bible. It doesn't get rid of all the bad things and just talk about roses and flowers. Think about this. Smart people, wise people, use their history in order to improve. Other kinds of people try to bury their history.
Finally, and some people may forget, but I certainly never will, that before you were HUD Secretary.
But before you ask that, let me just say something about the Confederate flag. When we bought a farm in rural Maryland, one of the neighbors put up a Confederate flag in protest. All the other neighbors then put up an American flag, and the other person took down the Confederate flag. We subsequently became friendly with those individuals. A lot of this has to do with people getting to know each other and relationships. But, we should be proud of our country, all of us. The American flag is an appropriate emblem, but we shouldn't impose our will on others.
Thank you for that, sir. Finally, as I was saying, I won't forget this. Some people may have. Before you were HUD Secretary, you were a world-famous brain surgeon. So I want to ask you a health question. President Trump plans to hold a big rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend, and we know we can draw a crowd, so there likely will be tens of thousands of people, and there's no requirement that they don't have masks. Forget the politics. As a public health matter, is that safe?
It will be done in conjunction with public health authorities, and it will be done according to the way that they have prescribed. As far as the virus is concerned, we have two choices. We can allow it to dominate us, or we can learn as much as we can about it, and we can learn how to live with it in a safe, prescribed manner. And I think the second option is the one that's going to be adopted.
Secretary Ben Carson, thank you, sir. Thanks for your time. Always good to talk with you.